On a quiet Florida street, ordinary bystanders witness something they will never forget. An SUV inches forward. Baby lies on the ground. A scream cuts through the air. Then suddenly, there is silence. What happened in those few seconds would ignite one of the most shocking investigations of the year. This is Minds of Murderers, the channel where we explore real criminal psychology, disturbing true crime cases, and the moments that change lives forever. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comment section. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to light. Tonight, we revisit the tragedy of 8-month-old Pablo Kai Golden, a case so heartbreaking, it left witnesses traumatized and detectives stunned. And to understand what really happened on that Florida roadway, we begin at the moment the nightmare began. The 911 call came in just after sunset, frantic, breathless, and almost incoherent. The caller's words tumbled over each other, but one detail cut through clearly enough to send every available unit racing toward the scene. There's a baby in the middle of the road. Within minutes, police cruisers, fire trucks, and EMS units converged on the quiet stretch of roadway. Their flashing lights turned the pavement into a chaotic blur of red, blue, and white. And there, illuminated by headlights, lay an 8-month-old infant, motionless on the asphalt. Firefighters rushed forward instantly. One dropped to his knees and began CPR, his gloved hands impossibly small against the child's chest. Another prepared an oxygen bag while a medic counted compressions. A tiny pacifier lay just a few inches away, resting beside a spreading pool of blood that should never have been there. Standing nearby, frozen in shock, was the baby's mother. Paramedics tried speaking to her, but she could barely form a sentence. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Her eyes were locked on the scene unfolding before her, her child on the pavement, surrounded by strangers fighting to save him. Drivers stopped their cars. People stepped out, some praying, others covering their mouths in disbelief. But no one, not even the first responders, understood how an infant had ended up in the middle of the road. Was it an accident? A fall? Something else? All they knew in that moment was simple. A baby was dying, and time was slipping away. As officers began securing the area, one critical question echoed through the flashing lights and confusion. Where were the parents when this happened? And how did an 8-month-old end up here alone? As first responders worked desperately to save the infant, officers began searching for any clue that could explain what happened. It didn't take long before the first eyewitness stepped forward, breathless, shaken, and pointing down the road. There was a black SUV, she said. It hit the baby and just kept going. Instantly, the scene shifted. What first looked like a tragic accident was now something far more alarming, a hit-and-run involving an infant. The witness described the vehicle as a black GMC Terrain, speeding away without so much as a brake light flicker. That detail sent officers into high alert. A child lying in the road was already devastating, but a driver fleeing the scene, that was unthinkable. Within minutes, police issued a bolo. Patrol cars fanned out in every direction. And just when it seemed the SUV might disappear, another civilian stepped forward, a man who had noticed the fleeing vehicle and decided to follow it. He trailed the black GMC Terrain all the way to a nearby gas station. There, the driver had pulled over, acting strangely, pacing around the car, almost as if trying to figure out what to do next. The witness kept his distance but immediately called police, telling them exactly where to find the vehicle. Units rushed to the gas station and boxed in the SUV. The driver stepped out, a young man, just 20 years old. Officers quickly identified him as Justin Golden, the father of the injured infant. But instead of panic, instead of fear, instead of the heartbreaking shock one would expect from a parent in this situation, Justin's reaction stunned investigators. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't crying. He wasn't asking, "Is my baby okay?" He was calm, too calm, as if he had no idea what had just happened, or worse, as if he didn't care. When officers approached and asked him to sit down, Justin complied without emotion. His voice stayed flat, cold, detached. And every second that passed made their suspicions grow. Why had he fled? Why didn't he stop? Why did his behavior seem so wrong for a father whose child was fighting for his life? Even before detectives began questioning him, one thing had become painfully clear. Something about Justin Golden's involvement was deeply, deeply wrong. Back at the scene, detectives were working quickly. The ambulance had already rushed the infant to the hospital, leaving behind a haunting silence, the kind that settles only after chaos has moved on. Officers fanned out, gathering statements from anyone who had seen even a fragment of what happened. One witness, a woman in her late 30s, stepped forward with shaken hands and a trembling voice. But her account would become the most crucial piece of the entire investigation. She told detectives she had been driving just a few cars behind the black GMC Terrain. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Traffic was moving normally, the SUV staying in its lane, until it suddenly wasn't. According to her, the SUV slowed abruptly, drifting toward the shoulder. Then she saw something that made her lean forward in disbelief. The driver's door opened while the vehicle was still rolling. She described a hand, a quick downward motion, and then in a split second, something small hit the pavement. The woman didn't understand what she had just witnessed, not until she got closer. "It was the baby," she whispered. The baby just appeared on the ground. Before she could process the horror, the SUV lurched forward again. The front tire rolled directly over the infant. She slammed her brakes so hard her seatbelt locked across her chest. Other drivers behind her swerved, panicked, trying to avoid the impossible scene unfolding ahead of them. She told detectives she screamed inside her car, hitting her horn, hoping the driver would stop, but he didn't. He never even looked back. Her voice cracked as she relived it. "I knew he had to feel it. He had to know he ran something over. There's no way he didn't." Detectives listened in stunned silence. Her description wasn't vague. It wasn't uncertain. It was painfully clear. And the more she spoke, the more horrifying the picture became. This wasn't a case of a baby wandering away. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was deliberate placement, followed by impact, followed by flight. Her testimony would become the backbone of the prosecution's case, the moment that shifted the investigation from confusion to certainty. And for the detectives standing there, hearing every detail, one chilling question rose to the surface. If this witness was right, then who put baby Pablo Golden on the ground in front of that moving SUV? As investigators dug deeper, a picture of the moments leading up to the horrific incident began to emerge. Detectives learned that the family had just left Walmart, where the parents, Justin and Shamir Golden, had gone to buy diapers and essentials for their 8-month-old son Pablo. At first glance, it seemed like a normal evening. But what happened next would shatter that assumption. According to Shamir, the two argued immediately after the purchase. The argument started over money, just $8 left over after buying what they needed, but it quickly escalated. Justin allegedly wanted to spend the extra money on marijuana, while Shamir insisted on using it for food. Voices were raised, tempers flared, and both parents exited the SUV at different points during the confrontation. Shamir told investigators that during the argument, she removed Pablo from his car seat, holding him as she walked away. Justin, meanwhile, stayed in the driver's seat, his frustration mounting. Witnesses reported seeing both parents on opposite sides of the SUV, moving around, shouting at each other, but no one fully understood the danger their son was in. The detectives pieced together that at some point, the SUV's door opened while Justin was still seated behind the wheel. Shamir later admitted she had placed Pablo down, attempting to shield him from the escalating fight. But in the chaos, that split-second decision led to the unimaginable. The infant ended up lying in the road, just as the SUV began moving forward again. It was a harrowing moment where small, ordinary actions collided with tragedy. A disagreement over money, a moment of anger, and a distracted parent behind the wheel, all combined in a way that no one could have predicted, but everyone would remember forever. For detectives, understanding this fight was essential. It wasn't just about the SUV or the witness accounts. It was about the chain reaction of decisions that led to Pablo being left vulnerable in the road. Every step, every second mattered, and it was becoming painfully clear how quickly ordinary arguments could turn into life-and-death consequences. By the time the scene was secured, investigators had a chilling realization. This was not a random accident. It was the culmination of a sequence of reckless and dangerous choices, each one pushing them closer to a tragedy that could have been prevented. Hours after the SUV incident, Justin Golden was escorted to the police station. The weight of what had happened still hadn't fully registered with him, or so it seemed. Detectives faced a father whose 8-month-old son had been critically injured, and yet his first concern was not for Pablo's well-being. "Do you know what happened to your son?" an officer asked, trying to gauge his reaction. Justin's reply was chilling in its detachment. I don't know. Am I in trouble for that? For investigators, those words raised immediate red flags. A parent in shock, they expected, would be frantic, pleading, desperate for information. But Justin remained calm, almost disconnected from the reality of the situation. As the questioning progressed, troubling details about the family's past behavior surfaced. Shamir spoke of prior domestic disputes, moments when arguments between Justin and herself had escalated into threats and, at times, physical altercations. She described incidents where anger had led to frightening threats against her and the children, though never resulting in serious harm. Detectives carefully documented everything. Every word, every hesitation, every deflection was critical. They asked Justin to recount the events leading up to the incident at the Walmart parking lot and the SUV. He explained the argument over money, the disagreement about gas versus food, and the brief moments where both parents left the vehicle. Yet even as he detailed the sequence, his tone remained disturbingly casual. He seemed more concerned with his own position, whether he would face consequences, than with a life-threatening injury to his son. At one point, detectives had to break the news. "Your son, he didn't survive," they said, voice low but firm. Justin's reaction was almost mechanical. Shock? Grief? Denial? Only fragments appeared. Instead of collapsing, he asked again, "Am I in trouble for this?" For law enforcement, this moment crystallized a painful truth. This was not simply a case of a tragic accident. The combination of reckless behavior, detachment, and prior patterns of conflict pointed to a level of disregard for the child's safety that could not be ignored. Every word Justin spoke, every detail Shamir provided, and every witness report collected up to this point would become crucial. They painted a disturbing portrait of a father who, intentionally or not, placed his child in the path of mortal danger. By the end of the interrogation, detectives knew they were confronting a situation far more complex and more devastating than the initial 911 call had suggested. With witness statements, interviews, and preliminary evidence collected, investigators turned to surveillance footage from nearby cameras. What they saw confirmed the horrifying truth in painfully clear detail. The black SUV, the same GMC Terrain reported by multiple witnesses, approached the traffic light. The driver's door opened briefly. A small downward motion followed. And then, in the split second that would change lives forever, 8-month-old Pablo Kai Golden was on the road. The SUV began to move forward. The front tire rolled over the infant, the witness later recalling the terrifying image, the tiny body lying on the double yellow line, feet outstretched, the pacifier nearby in a pool of blood. There was no hesitation, no stopping, no apparent recognition from the driver, only a continuation down the street. Investigators pieced together the sequence: an argument over $8, a car seat momentarily unbuckled, a baby removed for protection, a vehicle door opened, and in a split second, tragedy struck. Every choice, every split-second action led to the irreversible loss of Pablo's life. At the hospital, paramedics and medical staff confirmed the worst. Pablo had suffered lacerations to the brain, blunt head trauma, and skull fractures. Despite their efforts, he did not survive. The death was ruled a homicide, a devastating conclusion that weighed heavily on everyone involved. Police returned to Justin Golden. In custody, he was informed of the outcome. His reactions, the officers noted, were a mix of disbelief and detached panic. Words like, "I didn't mean to," repeated over and over. But the timeline was now clear, backed by eyewitness testimony and video evidence. The tragedy had unfolded exactly as described, a reckless act combined with indifference and poor judgment. The final timeline left no room for doubt. Pablo was placed in the path of the moving SUV. The SUV moved. The front tire hit him. The driver did not stop. And in the aftermath, an entire community would struggle to comprehend how a simple dispute and a few careless decisions could lead to such unimaginable loss. As Justin Golden awaited his legal fate, the chilling reality remained. A baby's life had been cut short, and the sequence of events, the arguments, the actions, the decisions, would forever be etched into the minds of those who witnessed it. For investigators, witnesses, and the public, the case was a stark reminder of how fleeting moments, anger, and recklessness can collide into tragedy. And for the viewers of this story, it's a chilling question that lingers. What could have been done differently? And who is truly accountable for the life that was lost?